It's over. It meant nothing. It was in the past. I'll never do it again. Have you ever noticed that pronouns really have a subtle and uncanny way to minimize and protect us from the truth? What makes it so difficult for a wayward spouse to talk about the infidelity? And why do they not often want to talk about details of the affair? Well, it isn't always what you may think. There's a lot of reasons that can make it difficult to talk, to share, to admit their feelings. And one of the first ones is, at a glance, the disconnection from their true feelings. They may be holding on to guilt for all of the feelings they had during their affair or for their affair partners. And a lot of times, wayward spouses somehow think that if they begin to talk about it, it's only going to further hurt and damage their betrayed spouse. Sometimes they fear being judged, misunderstood, and it keeps them silent. Sometimes they just don't want to do it because as they try to process what's happened and begin to sort out their emotions, it can be a wrong assumption to think that anything they say ultimately won't matter or be believed. So it's a real false way of thinking, but it lends to something like, why even share? Sometimes even what could be happening if you're further down the road is a wayward spouse actually might be grieving. And yes, if you've never considered that concept, wayward spouses do need to grieve the loss of what they found in their acting out or their affair, as weird as that may seem. No matter how dysfunctional or wrong that it may have been, it can be incredibly painful to start to put words and share and talk about what happened. Anytime an affair has an emotional component and attachment, a wayward spouse is going to go through a period of time where they are trying to let go of the validation, specialness, sometimes tenderness, kindness they may have felt. I know in my own recovery from my acting out, I found it really difficult to first admit anything about my most recent affair because I was feeling a wave of sadness of what I had lost. But at the very same time, I felt a wave of kind of guilt to even admit that sadness and to begin to put words to as wrong as maybe it was. During that time, this person that I had an affair with, I believed wrongly that it was the only person in the world that understood me and made me feel special. We have a lot of words for this kind of place wayward spouses find themselves in. It could be limerence. It could feel like downright baloney to you, and that's fair, or just delusional. But to try to understand that the feelings a wayward spouse can have seem very real to them at the time. I know there was a part of me, again, that wanted to let go of those feelings, but another part of me that really was overwhelmed with shame for admitting that I even had them, especially when I was faced with my betrayed mate's pain and hurt in their eyes. The very thing that brought me kind of joy and kindness is the very thing that devastated and ruined my mate. And that was a really hard kind of line to walk. It's going to be imperative that a wayward spouse consider programs, groups, even our Hope for Healing course, something like that, so they can begin to have room to process their feelings, to talk about them without seeing the pain on their mates' faces. And the biggest reason that we see that wayward spouses really don't want to talk about their affairs and acting out is most always often shame. After discovery, wayward spouses are going, hopefully, to feel remorse over what they did. And as they get to feeling guilty and sadness, you have to know these are really uncomfortable feelings and they are not used to sitting in them. If wayward spouses are asked questions about the affair, not only do they start to feel uncomfortable, but some, if they really shut down, it's maybe because they find their shame that they're feeling downright intolerable. For so many wayward, they find their secretive actions a moral failure and one of the most shameful things they could have ever done, which is why they hide it. That pattern of hiding, that affair, that addiction, it's a real disconnect from their true self and their heart in some way. Most wayward spouses, almost all of them, at first, they have a very, very low tolerance for the ability to handle emotional pain or sit in their emotions that cause them distress. I know me, for example, I learned early on in my life, if I could just be funny, if I could make people laugh, I could break the tension of any uncomfortable emotion that was perceived as painful. And let me tell you this, being funny, cracking a joke, it was a great coping mechanism to avoid pain. And while this may work when you're 5 years old, trust me, it's not nearly as endearing as cute when you're 45. If any one of you are the one that actually had the affair, I really want you to hear this. Every time that you do not talk about what happened, here's what your silence conveys. It conveys to your mate that you do not care. Your silence, your hesitation, your stuttering. It also conveys that you want to continue a dysfunctional pattern of avoidance and minimization. Your silence tells others that your own discomfort and fear of judgment is going to come first, which again makes you look really selfish. It communicates to your betrayed spouse that you're always going to put your needs ahead of theirs. I know if you've been the one that's wayward, this isn't an easy process, but change is only going to happen if you continue and commit to try to use real words to replace it, and you begin to start to talk. If you are the one that's been betrayed and you're really frustrated by this, today is just meant for you to try to see what your mate's silence and hesitation actually could mean rather than the message it communicates. Please consider joining us at one of our EMS weekends so you can practice this together and really find some practical tools to start the much needed conversations for healing and repair.